Today on National Police Day, the National Police Commissioner, Khehla Sithole, released a statement in which he denied that he had tried to stop the investigation into the murder, I suppose assassination, of the anti-gang unit head Charl Kinnear. The Daily Maverick reported this week that the independent police investigative Directorate had now opened a criminal case against Sithole, saying he's refused to cooperate with their investigation. The police minister, Khehla, has previously asked President Cyril Ramaphosa to start a process to determine whether Sithole is fit for office. But Ramaphosa, as far as we know, has not responded to the request. So then, what is going on in our police service? Maybe I should ask, is it possible to know what is going on? And why are there always leadership fights in our police service? Eldred Klerk is the Principal Associate at the Africa Centre for Security and Intelligence, Praxis. Mpho Kwinika is the General Secretary of the Union IPUSA. He is, in fact, still a police officer, although there's a legal argument about that for some reason. Eldred, let me start with you. Good afternoon to you both. Eldred, it seems to me shocking that the police watchdog accuses our National Police Commissioner of breaking the law for refusing to cooperate with their investigation. Am I right to be shocked?
We should all be shocked because there's no way that IPID would bring a frivolous charge against the National Police Commissioner. This is not personal either. It is professional and potentially criminal. So in terms of his professional obligations as the accounting officer of the South African Police Service, it's incumbent upon him and the institution to do everything that they can to cooperate with IPID and to ensure that it can do its work effectively and impartially. The fact that they went as far as bringing a criminal charge against him suggests that he has something to answer for. And we ought to be shocked for that because we take it as a professional and as somebody who's sworn an oath to the Constitution and to his office that he would be completely in support of giving IPID all the support they can get.
Well, Eldred, I mean, the claim against Sithole, as I understand it, seems to be that the police knew that Charl Kinnear would be vulnerable, that Sithole and others essentially allowed him to be left vulnerable with the consequence that he was killed. I mean, how strong is that claim? I suppose, to put the question another way, is why would Sithole not cooperate with this investigation?
Well, yes, I mean, why wouldn't he? It causes all kinds of suspicions and speculations and leaves most of us confused. What we tend to not see in the South African Police Service, we see this clamor for discipline and we see this talk about command and control. And Mpho would, as a union member and as a serving South African police officer, would, I guess, support me in the contention that what we don't see is a duty of care and the duty to care and protect for the members of the South African Police Service. Because command and leadership has a duty to ensure that their discipline, their protocols are followed, and that police are effective. They also have a duty to protect police officers working in high-risk situations, and that should be unquestioned. It shouldn't be a question of budget. It shouldn't be a question of anything, because potentially somebody can lose their life. Because the threat and the risk are real. We've seen police, magistrates, and lawyers and others killed, well, almost with impunity across many years. So it is incumbent upon police management and senior leadership and command to ensure that the officers are protected and cared for when on duty, and especially when working with high risk and potentially threatening cases where there's a real risk to them and their families.
Mpho Kwinika, let me put the question to you. I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, this is a person who headed an anti-gang unit. I mean, I'm not a police specialist, and I know how dangerous that is.
Yeah, but he deserved protection from the system. The system has got all resources made available to it to make sure that people like him are looked after. But we lost policing. We lost policing, I think, in 2017 when National Commissioner, the current one who was sitting, was appointed. He was appointed at the time when we came out strongly and said he's not fit for that job. And we have done that not personally because we have looked at the history of the work that he's been doing before. And you will recall, Steve, when many things happened. One, it was the issue of when, after he was employed, then he get into the issue of the NASREC. The grabber issues is getting battled in it. Those are the issues of politicians. He has got nothing to do.
Just to go back a little bit, the grabber issue is where the device that intercepts phone calls clearly was being used at NASREC, and so he was playing an ANC political role.
Exactly, and that's where he lost it. And then from there, he then there was a small piece of document which was written per hand, not typed, It's like people had a casual meeting and said, oh, the conference is in trouble. You need the grabber machines. We don't work like that. This is an executive department of state which has got the duty to make sure that the lives and properties of South Africans are taken care of. So the person who leads this institution should have the expertise and the know-how of how to deal with issues, not only of protecting South Africans, your own employees who have a duty to make sure that the police realizes its constitutional mandate to ensure safety and security to all inhabitants of this country.
Eldred's behind you is nodding quite vigorously. I'm going to come back to you in a moment, Eldred, on this, because I think it is important. Mpho, I do want to ask, is this kind of issue having an impact on officers on the ground? You represent rank-and-file officers. We've got all of these political games being played out at the top. We've got the point that Eldred made earlier. And, let me just be very clear. I'm a journalist, and often it's sort of almost my job to shine the light on the abuses by police officers. But also we should remember that I am not tough enough, frankly, to be a police officer, because it's an impossible job. So this infighting that we see at the top, the politicization, if we can call it that, of the police service, is that having an impact on the lives of ordinary officers?
It demoralizes them. It has got an impact on them. Steve, there's no one who wants to kill a person. This department has got all authorities with it. Members are trained to do a professional work. They need to get the support from the police themselves, the management. The employee health and wellness program need to come and play a central role in making sure that the police get the best out of it. You cannot expect police officers who are doing an unthinkable work. Nobody comes to the police officers and says, you have done an exceptional work there. You have done, because if you do a good job to a robber, it is a bad job to the families of the robber, because the robber it's either is killed, is shot at, or injured, and all these bad things have happened to them. So it's a very difficult work. It does have an impact, and we need to make sure that policing changes the direction that is taken, or General Sithole has put it on.
Eldred, we talk about what happened at Maverick. We talk about the politicization of the police. It seems that the National Police Commissioner has played a role in that. Is there a track record then that's developed here around the National Police Commissioner? That, in fact, he is not doing what he is supposed to do. And it's not just in the instance of Charl Kinnear, it's in other instances too. And a track record leads to, if we have a train of events, if we have a particular trend, this is very worrying.
Well, it's worrying insofar as that if somebody does not cooperate with the idea that there's the rules of the game, and the rules of the game is that you cooperate very closely with other key departments of state, that somehow in refusing to be part of this, and this is the allegation, you'd also then tend to challenge the very basis of our constitutional democracy. You challenge the institutions, and you challenge the rules of the game. And when you do that, and you undermine the capabilities and the ability of these key institutions to function properly, then you actually pose a counter-systemic threat to the country. And that is hugely problematic. And I guess that's what the ANC and others are saying, that there's a counter-revolution going on. In intelligence term, in national security term, we would call that kind of behavior where somebody seeks to undermine the constitutional democracy, where somebody challenges the very rules of the game and says, no, I'm either above it or I am playing it, but I'm playing it by my own rules, and challenge the very fabric of the institutions. We call that a counter-systemic threat. That is hugely problematic. Mpho also alluded to the qualifications we look for in a national commissioner. And to my mind, we need a national commissioner who can deal with the most important security threat and risk in the country, namely the economy and the consequences of a lack of development and growth. When that person, in his person and his official capacity, seems to not give a damn, it undermines confidence in a vital institution like the police. And that is very worrisome. And it seems to be that there's a broader, in my mind, leads to the speculation that there's a broader agenda at play. And if that agenda at play is one of a counter-systemic threat, then we have the right to ask then, is that person fit for office? And what game are they playing, and who are they playing that game with?
So, Eldred, it comes back to the question of everything that you say is true, and I think you're actually being polite when you say he doesn't appear to give a damn, then that leads us to the next question. The President hasn't, as I understand it, open request from the Police Minister to investigate this person's fitness for office. The President doesn't seem to be acting.
Well, it's only the president, unfortunately, who can answer that. On the face of it, the perception is that the president indeed is not acting. The president may be cautious for whatever reason. The president may be privy to a bigger threat at play. There may be a game that you and I are not aware of that involves the political economy or just, as I said, the idea of a counter-systemic threat. However, if that is true, my best advice to the president would be to take us in his confidence. He is the elected leader. He is somebody that we look to for public leadership. And if he actually takes us, the citizens, in his confidence and say, I'm not wanting to be alarmist. I am concerned about the fact that our democracy has been eroded, that our key appointees, my key appointees, don't seem to be wanting to play by the rules, and I am having to act against them. If I act against them, there may be consequences, and I want the South African population to judge both my decisions and the outcomes purely on the fact that I'm coming from a place that is informed by the Constitution and our laws of the land. I would support a president like that. All we need him now is to exercise political will. And political will is not about ill intent or the inability to do something. It's simply when you fail to act, then you're potentially betraying the public trust. When you do act, then you're displaying the political will, and that is worthy of being supported.
Mpho, Kwinika, there's another question here, which is, does removing Khehla Sithole as the National Police Commissioner fix anything, or are the problems so much bigger than him?
No, I think if he was removed in 2017, I think we would have seen something different. You see, Steve, we need to allow people who have got keen interest, people who have got interest in policing, to come and play the role in making sure that policing becomes the best. If you close the doors to people who criticizes you when you have done something wrong, then we start to question you. On whose ticket are you there? Because if you are on the ticket of the society, we will not be having the executive committees, executive departments. I'm talking about the ministry, the politicians, not being happy with you. We will not be happy in the society, South Africans, not being happy with you. See what happened in July. Up until today, the crime is high. We wouldn't be having problems with the members of the service themselves. Many of them were leaving this environment in droves. More, I think you will have seen the stats from the ISS. We have read them today. More than 1,000 and 2,000, more than 1,000 are leaving, resigning. Some of them not through dismissals and other, even attrition. But to go and get those numbers which we have lost now, it's going to be very difficult. The numbers of the police have dwindled, and we need to rebuild this so that we are able to be in a position to be able to service South Africans. So, removal of a person, yes, it plays an important role because it will motivate those people who are sitting there and watching the mistakes that are being done by an incumbent who is in that position. If you were to ask me and says, do we have to remove him? He was supposed to have been removed in 2017.
Eldred, I mean, we've had this problem in our leadership of the SAPS for so long. So, I mean, we can talk about Khehla Sithole, we can talk about Ria Piega. In a way, it seems to me, we actually just simply haven't recovered from what happened with Jackie Selebi. He was in office for a very long time. He was then convicted of taking money from a drug deal. And I must say this, although I'm sure to get an angry letter or a WhatsApp or someone from the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, he was, I think, protected to an extent by the former president, Thabo Mbeki. Has the police service just never actually recovered from that?
Well, there seems to have been, within the police, unfortunately, the idea that they can go back in the lager and romanticize the days when they were a police force. And that is a huge problem. We have the National Development Plan 2030. We have the Farlam Commission that dates back all the way to the Goldstone Commission, the panel of experts reports, and now, of late, the presidential task team for the July insurrection, all who have commented on the fact that firstly, the problem is political. It is up to government and policymakers to now intervene in the Department of Police to ensure that competent, principled, ethical leadership is instituted and that a command structure that is qualified, competent, and actually upholds and respects the Constitution and the law of the country is put in place. Failure to do so would be a failure of the very recommendations and the Constitution and would undermine the development project of the country. because this police is an essential institution to ensure safety and security and ensure an economic, a political and social environment in which there can be growth, in which there can be health, and in which we can actually live full and quality life. Without a critical intervention at this time, which again I say is a political problem, meaning government and policymakers have to intervene to make sure that the recommendations that are already there, that's staring us in the face, 2030 is round the corner, Stephen, and Mpho can back me on this. If the intervention is not today, then we lose the political moment, and we will be discussing this, unfortunately, for a few more years to come. And in the meantime, South African citizens will continue to suffer, our economy will continue to suffer, and our standing both in the regional and global community will continue to be diminished, and that is hugely problematic.
Well, I suppose another way of putting it is without a proper police service, people will die. I mean, there'll be higher levels of crime. That's the huge cost to this. And Paul Kwinika, I mean, do you agree? Is the politicization of the police the problem? Just know there's a question I'm going to put to you about unions and politics, so be warned. But is the politicization of the police a problem?
It is. We need to depoliticize policing. I think the union's role in policing is completely different from the other unions in other sectors. We are very sensitive towards the issues, how we deal with the issues of unionism in policy. We know when to go on strike if we are to go on strike, which you know that we are not supposed to. There are a lot of restrictions on police officers in this environment. That is why we are taught to talk and to talk up until we are blue, up until we find solution to the issues which are in front of us. We need to depoliticize policy, allow professionalism to enter this environment and encourage police officers. Remember, Steve, if you have followed the South African Human Rights Commission, there's a lead investigator there by the name of Advocate Kennedy. He said the minimum requirements police officials has, minimum requirements, is the diploma. We need to encourage our police officers to read. We need to encourage our police officers to learn. South Africans are learned people, and they want to get the best out of policy. So we cannot continue and give them garbage. We need to give them professionalism and professionalism.
So what we want to do then is if we want to de-link our politics from it. But isn't it also the case, and Eldred, let me put this to you, the police are so useful an asset to any politician. I mean, isn't this the problem? If I've understood my constitution correctly, and I change my understanding of our constitution from time to time, but the National Police Commissioner is appointed by the President. Does the problem start there? Because, again, Mbeki and Celebi, Zuma, Ria Pierre, could keep going with Zuma, but when we look at how useful it is to have someone who will give you information from a device that can intercept cell phones during an ANC conference, no president in the world is going to give that up.
Look,
whoever makes the appointment, that in itself is not a concern. The basis that I think the National Development Plan 2030 is suggesting, and what we as a panel was suggesting, is that we need to know what the pool of people are or were from which the appointment was made. We need to know what the criteria and the appointment competencies and job description as it was, and we need to know where the checks and balances are. So the process of appointment, hiring, and contracting needs to be transparent, and so that we can judge the performance of said individual over the course of the 5 years for which they are appointed. Because the checks and balances are there. What seems to happen is that once we have the incumbent in office, there seems to be this idea that now I don't have to play by those rules. I don't have to embody the Constitution, and I can challenge the very ideology in which the state is founded. And then we find that we can't seem to remove said individual. And I believe that it's in our contracting and our appointment process where we actually fail. Mpho rightfully said, should we not have been more concerned about the appointment process right at the beginning to ask why this individual, who else was considered, what was the process of appointment, and how are we going to judge said incumbent, and how is said incumbent through government, meaning Parliament and its various committees, and public, and the fourth estate, Stephen, is going to be questioned and held publicly accountable. because we cannot just have them politically accountable when we don't know what they are saying in those hollowed and hallowed corridors of Parliament. That should be a public process, and that should be more than just release of crime stats where the crime is going up or down, because if we judge you on the fact that of those numbers, then every year, year on year, we have these stats going up. On that alone, we would then say that your performance has been bad and that we've lost confidence in you as the police leadership, and therefore maybe you should vacate your office. So it cannot be that somebody simply judged on the basis of that.
It's interesting that you say we don't know what they say. If they've got a grabber, they absolutely know what we're saying, and that's one of the problems. That's one of the problems that we have. There's a question I want to put to both of you, and I think it's a vital question about the future. I made the point earlier, and it's a serious point, I think, that the cost of this can be measured in lives. Now, policing, as I understand the philosophy of policing, Mpho, you and Eldred are the experts on the philosophy of policing, not me, but policing is about consent. You do what a police officer tells you to do because you consent to being policed. And whether you're on a Friday night and the officer is telling you to put your drink away because you're actually not allowed it outside the bar or the tavern or whatever it is, you're doing that because that's the rule of law, and you accept the rule of law as someone who lives in South Africa. Now, if we don't trust the police because of its leadership, because it's politicized, for whatever reason, then that consent is going to fall away. And I think there's plenty of evidence that we see that already. I'm sure it's happened to your officers. They just get attacked for no reason. Not because someone wants to steal their gun, just because they're a police officer. How worried about that are you, that consent is falling away because of what's happening at the top?
Yeah. You see, look, the police work, they enjoy their duty, their job, when they enforce the law to the law-abiding citizens. People who understand that when the police stops you, it's for a good cause. But the moment you have situations like this, where the public does not even know now when to trust the police officers, if they were to trust the police officers, they don't know, with what is happening around them. They feel like, why must I conform? Why must I comply with all these things when the police officers are themselves involved in many of the things that are bad that are happening in the country? So it is important for us and stakeholders, Steve, to get involved and make sure that the police do the work which South Africans will be happy about. We also want South Africans as well to help the police to realize their objectives of making sure that each and every one of them is safe.
Eldred, are you worried about this issue of consent falling away? We're going to see more attacks on police officers, and the police response, for some reason, I think I'm going to have to use two Afrikaans phrases here. One would be skit and donner, and the other, I think, would be kragtaktigheid. In other words, they would be using force because the communities no longer listen.
Well, absolutely. We already see a breakdown in the image and confidence and trust in the police. We see the police dating back, and few police commissioners now, having gone back into their lager and having gone back to the aggressive us and them policing. We saw that at the outset of the lockdown regulations, when police was tasked with making sure that we all adhere to those regulations. The idea was simply that they almost expected that South African citizens would question it, that they would engage in conversation, and that's how most of the confrontations happen between police and the citizenry. It's often not one of violence. It's one that gets escalated, unfortunately, when a member of the public asks a question and the police seem to think that their actions cannot be questioned. Often that escalates into something that is unfortunate, where a gun is drawn or violence is used, and the pretext then happens when somebody gets arrested, and they get arrested for resisting arrest. And one of the first almost unfortunate interventions I had to do in police training was address this question of, your first charge on the charge sheet cannot be, I arrest Eldred because he resisted arrest. The first charge would be, I sought to arrest him for this. In trying to do that, he then resisted, and this is an additional charge. So that suggests to me that interaction between ordinary citizens and the police is often one that is fraught, as one that almost from the outset is viewed by the police as hostile, and this culture has been inculcated in the police that there's us and there's them. And part of trying to ensure that we have democratic principled policing is to say, you police, firstly, by the authority and power vested in you by us, the citizens. If you abuse that power in any way, that authority will be taken away and you will be asked to account for the abuse of that authority. We as citizens have every right to question police in almost every decision they made. Sometimes we've been told, shut up, first let them do what they want to do, let them arrest you, let them do first and question later. No, we actually have every right to be asking, why this interaction? Why are you stopping me? What's the pretext for this engagement? Please, may I have your name? Please, may I see your identification? We need to go, this is what I thought police was going to do, and they said, go back to basics. But what it seems to suggest is, you shut up, I'm here to police, and I'm here to enforce the law, rather than I'm here to render a service because I'm concerned about your health, your safety, and your security. This idea of law enforcement, and most South Africans, even you would know, don't speak of a police service. It's almost become a bit of a joke. And people will say, no, but they are force. Because that's the basis for the interaction, unfortunately, that the rank and file members have had with ordinary citizens on a daily basis. That is a political question that has to be addressed. It's a public leadership question that has to be addressed. And it's a command question that has to be addressed. And so unless we change the command, unless we get political will and political leadership on the issue, and the implementation of the raft of suggestions and recommendations that there already are, the strengthening of key institutions like IPID, Civilian Secretariat, and the like, and working consciously, not for public relations, but for community relations, and we strengthen public governance, which means we stop talking government and we're talking participative democracy and not just public representatives. We will not be getting to this development state that cares for everybody. And the relationship between South Africans and the citizens will continue to be fraught.
Eldred de Klerk, thank you very much indeed. Principal Associate at the Africa Centre for Security and Intelligence Practice. And Mpho Kwinika, I appreciate the time. Thank you for coming in. General Secretary at IPUSA, a serving police officer as well.